So, you might not have noticed, but while you were going about your life this past month, the 119th Congress was, well, let's just say they were very busy. They just pushed through a whole stack of 10 new laws. And the big question is, what's actually in them for you? And when I say a stack, I mean it. We're talking 477 pages of new federal law. It's dense, it's complicated, and honestly, it kind of brings up one massive question. Yeah, exactly. What does all of this actually do? Well, that's what we're here for. We're going to cut right through all the legal jargon and find out the real world impact of these laws, starting with a few that are focused on helping people when they need it most. So, the first big theme that you see pop up in this legislative blitz is all about safety nets. Protecting veterans from foreclosure, helping disaster victims get aid faster, and tackling a major public health crisis head on. Okay, first up, we've got the VA Home Loan Reform Act. And let me tell you, this is a huge deal. It is the biggest change to the VA's home loan program in more than a decade, and it's designed to fix a system that was, frankly, letting way too many veterans fall through the cracks and lose their homes. So, how does it work? Well, it totally changes the game. Before, the VA mostly just guaranteed loans. Now, they can actually step in directly. The VA pays the bank to get the veteran's loan all caught up. Then the veteran owes that money back to the VA. But get this, often with no monthly payments until they sell or refinance the house. It's this really smart three-way partnership that can literally stop a foreclosure right in its tracks. And the impact here is massive. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that this new program is going to prevent 45,000 veteran foreclosures over the next 10 years. It's a $2.8 billion investment to make sure that the people who served our country can stay in their homes. Now, moving from one kind of crisis to another, the next law is all about tackling the absolute nightmare of bureaucracy that people face after a disaster. I mean, can you imagine losing everything in a flood or fire, and then the government asks you for the very documents that just burned up? The Filing Relief for Natural Disasters Act is meant to fix that broken system. And just look at the difference between the old way and the new way. It's night and day. The old system was a maze of paperwork, separate applications for every agency, and just waiting and waiting. The new way is built for a real crisis. Don't have your deed? Okay, maybe an affidavit from your neighbor or utility bill will work now. And instead of filling out different forms for FEMA and the Small Business Administration, there's just one single application. The whole point is to get help flowing in days, not weeks. The last law in this section, the HALT Fentanyl Act, treats the opioid crisis like a war that needs to be fought on multiple fronts. This isn't a single-shot solution. It's a comprehensive strategy that hits traffickers with tougher penalties, gives law enforcement better tools, pumps more money into treatment, and beefs up security at the border to stop the drugs from ever getting in. All right, let's shift gears. The next group of laws moves us away from immediate crisis response and more into long-term management, specifically managing the nation's money and the wild, fast-moving world of digital tech. So before we jump into the next law, we gotta know one key word: rescission. It sounds really technical, but I promise it's simple. Imagine Congress gives an agency a chunk of money for a project. If that agency doesn't spend it all, a rescission is just the official act of taking that leftover money back. And keeping that definition in mind, check out the impact of the new Rescissions Act. It cancels $12.8 billion in unspent money from across the entire federal government. This is a huge move aimed directly at cutting down the federal deficit. So how they pick what to cut? Well, this wasn't some blind slash and burn situation. As one source put it, this was a sophisticated approach. Committees in Congress spent months digging through the books to find these specific pots of money that were just sitting around unspent. Maybe the program came in under budget, or it just wasn't needed anymore. It was targeted, it was data-driven, it was basically a surgical strike on government waste. All right, now for a topic that honestly feels like it's pulled from a sci-fi movie: stablecoins. The easiest way to think of them is like a digital dollar, a type of crypto that's designed to always be worth, well, a dollar. And this new Genius Act is Congress's first real attempt to write the official rulebook for this whole new kind of money. Now, the act itself is dense, but it really comes down to four main ideas, all trying to balance safety with innovation. First, it sets up a federal licensing system, kind of like for a bank. Second, it forces these companies to prove their digital coins are backed by actual, high-quality assets. Third, it gives you, the consumer, clear rights and protections against fraud. And maybe most interesting, it creates something called regulatory sandboxes, which are basically safe spaces for companies to test out new financial tech while the government supervises. And for our final theme, Congress turned its attention to preserving key pieces of the American story. This means tackling some historical land rights for indigenous communities and protecting national heritage sites for all of us. So here we have two new bills that work together to address some really long-standing issues for Alaska Native communities. Think of it like this. The Lands Restoration Act is about the ground itself, restoring land rights, clearing up who owns what. At the same time, the Settlement Trust Act is about the money, making it simpler for people to actually get the benefits they're owed from their settlement trusts. So one handles the land, the other handles the legacy. And the last three laws are all about taking care of our national sites. First, we have an act that renames the Anahuac Wildlife Refuge in Texas to the Jocelyn Nungurray National Wildlife Refuge, honoring an individual while keeping its conservation mission going strong. Next, in Massachusetts, a new law kicks off a study to see if the Salem Maritime Site, which is America's first National Historic Site, should be expanded. And finally, you've got the Apex Area Technical Corrections Act, which is basically legislative housekeeping. It just fixes a few small errors in older land laws so everything can run smoothly. Okay, so after all that, what is the big picture? We've zipped through 10 different laws that cover everything from veteran housing to cryptocurrency. Let's step back, connect the dots, and see what this flurry of activity really tells us about what Congress is focused on right now. And when you look at it all together, you see this really fascinating mix of priorities. It shows Congress is juggling a lot. They're balancing these immediate critical human needs, like support for veterans and disaster victims, with long-term financial planning, regulating new technology, and preserving our country's history and heritage. So, what are the big takeaways from all of this? Well, first, there's a really clear focus on helping vulnerable people. Second, you see this theme of making government work better, whether that's cutting red tape for disaster aid or clawing back unspent money. Third, Congress took a surprisingly proactive step into the future by setting up a framework for digital currency. And finally, they showed a real commitment to continuing the long, hard work of addressing complex historical issues. These 10 laws are really just a snapshot in time. What one very busy month of work looks like. They've solved some problems and they've created new frameworks for dealing with others. And that just leaves us with one final thing to think about. With all this now on the books, what's the next big challenge that our lawmakers are going to turn to?